if you haven't been following, within the last month, there's been 2 $100 million deals made for podcasts. The most recent one is what we're going to talk about here is Alex Cooper. Do you know who she is?
I've seen clips of some of her show.
She has a show called Call Her Daddy, which is extremely popular. Before that, about a month prior, all right, first of all, SiriusXM made this deal for $125 million for Alex Cooper's show. We'll get into that in a second. A month prior, they did a deal, or maybe 2 months prior, for this podcast called Smartless. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, is that the one with Sean Hayes and
Jason Bateman and
Will Arnett? Yeah.
Now, they spent $100 million to get the rights and everything for Smartless, which I don't know how they're going to make that money back because you bought it after the show peaked. The show was building momentum. I guess it started out of something from the pandemic. And
which most of these did.
They did a whole thing where they had Biden, Obama, and Clinton on their show. They were behind the scenes from that. Remember that charity fundraiser thing? Not charity fundraiser. That campaign fundraiser thing they did.
Yeah, they had all three
at Radio City Music Hall, where they had all three on stage, right? Well, before that happened, backstage, they did their podcast with all three of them.
Mm-hmm.
So you have 3 presidents, 2 former, 1 sitting on there. You've peaked.
Yeah.
So after that happens, Sirius, in their infinite wisdom, comes around and offers them $100 million for distribution and rights to, for ad sales and all those things right there. It's like, how are you topping that? Whether you agree with their politics or their positions or not, how are you topping that? The Pope, maybe, at some point.
I mean, they got a good list of guests that they have on here, but it's no one as, I would say, interesting as those 3 at the same time.
No.
Because, you've got the Lisa Kudrows, you've got your Nate Bargatze. I mean, these are people that have been on 1,000 other shows. They go on Conan, they go on all this stuff. Like, you're not going to hear anything as interesting as talking to 3 former presidents. You're just not.
Yeah. So their show was interesting. Again, it was the 3 of them that built something out of the pandemic. Yeah. Then they started getting a lot of guests on, and sometimes that can be hit or miss for a show when you start having a lot of guests where your show is basically just guests.
Yeah.
And then when it's all celebrity guests, there's nothing more boring than a show where all their episodes are just celebrity guests.
See,
that's what happened to Mark Maron's podcast. Mark Maron, his podcast was interesting because the guy was a mess. Emotionally, physically, substance, whatever it was. And when he would talk about his life and he would talk about things he was going through and his idiosyncrasies and his concerns and his paranoia, that was fascinating and that was interesting. And it's not a dance monkey dance type of thing. It was something he was putting out willingly on his own, and hearing those stories was great. When his podcast, what is it called? What the fuck? WTF. When his podcast started becoming, today is such and such day on the WTF podcast. I'm like, it's all, and look, and he peaked too. He had Obama on while Obama was sitting president. Mm-hmm. And good for him, not knocking that. But after that, it's like, where do you go from there? So, and that's why his podcast never got as big, and he's not getting the deals. I remember he was very outspoken when Joe Rogan got that, $100 million, what set off the trend of $100 million podcast deals. He was not happy that he wasn't getting picked up to do anything like that. And I kind of agree. I think he should have gotten something like along those lines for the extensive catalog that he had.
And he's been doing it for years before podcasting really was a mainstream term to use. Like, he was on the forefront of getting that kind of content out there.
Right.
So, yeah, this week Smartless has Jared Leto, which, you love Jared Leto, which is hilarious because I just added that as a concert for Sunday. So I'm going to go see 30 Seconds to Mars.
Why put yourself through that nonsense?
I want to see AFI again. So I'm
the band that Rob showed up for 3 days early?
No, I think that was a different band, but that was hilarious too. Yeah, like they had moved AFI. Something else.
So anyway, Smartless got bought for $100 million, and it's like, if you listen to the show now, it's obvious that 2 of the 3 actually do work and prep for it, and then Sean Hayes just shows up and has no idea half the time what's going on. But it's not what it once was.
Yeah.
We come to Alex Cooper, Call Her Daddy. Her podcast started at Barstool. It was her and this other woman, Sophia with an F was her name. And they had a show at Barstool for a while, was very successful. From what I understand, Sophia's boyfriend started making deals with like HBO and other places that were not including Barstool. And Portnoy and his staff were like, this goes against our agreement here. You can't go and do that. The show wound up breaking up, or they like just stopped doing it as all this legal shit was going on.
Yeah, they released their last episode, I think, like 2020.
And then Alex was saying, it's like, Alex, I guess, either didn't know or just backed out of the whole thing. And she said, yeah, I had nothing to do with these other deals that they were making. So wound up leaving. That deal fell apart with Barstool, and I think Alex just gave. I think Portnoy just gave Alex her stuff to let her go, whatever the deal they worked out. And so she took it with her. Was doing Call Her Daddy. Was getting really successful. That Spotify came around and spent $60 million on her podcast for I think 2 years. Her
podcast is back in like 21. Yeah.
Her podcast contract ends this year. She's not renewing with them because Sirius swooped in for $125 million to bring her over there. Now, while we're going to sort this out, other news broke of another $100 million deal. So I'm going to tell you this.
That's what I couldn't believe.
And then we're going to go back to Alex because I'm going to read the breakdown for it. Amazon then announces that they spent $100 million for the podcast done by Travis and Jason Kelsey. So they had this podcast before he started dating Taylor Swift.
Oh, yeah.
And before, I think before the Super Bowl stuff even
Oh, yeah. They've been doing it for
them.
like a year or two.
Right?
Yeah.
And so this was getting a lot of attention, especially when Travis started dating Taylor Swift. Really started upping their stature in the
clout,
podcasting
as it were.
Right. So that Amazon paid them $100 million for the next couple years for the rights to their podcast. With I think Amazon owns Wondery is the podcast network that they're going under. So that just means they get distribution rights and ad sale rights. So they get to place ads on all their stuff and what have you. So that's, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's like the fifth $100 million deal that's happened in the last couple of years for podcasts. Now, one I didn't mention that's in there is Conan O'Brien, and that was about like a year or two ago. SiriusXM paid him $150 million for everything Team Coco podcast division.
Yep.
So all the audio, which is Conan, and then any of the other smaller podcasts that are on Conan's Team Coco net roster, if you will, are all under Sirius right now, licensed, not owned, to be distributed through Sirius, ad sales place, whatever. But I think that deal is that they get to broadcast them on a Sirius channel or something.
Yeah, I think they have a Team Coco channel on the actual satellite.
Right. And then a week later, they go out to public release to RSS feeds to like Spotify, Apple, what have you.
Yeah.
But then Conan made another deal for their video stuff, and I think with YouTube, and they put the video versions out the same time that Sirius has the exclusive audio. So you don't get your audio till a week later, but you get to watch the video on YouTube and those places at the same time. So it's like Conan double dipped, and good on him. I'm not knocking Conan at all. Very fucking smart on him and his business partner. I can't think of his
Aaron
name.
Blair,
Jeff
is it?
Ross or something.
Yeah, I think it's Jeff Ross.
That runs all this stuff there. It's smart for them to do this and double dipped and making tons of money and again, good on Conan.
They essentially did the South Park, Trey Parker and Matt Stone bit where they're like, we're going to let everybody get a piece of South Park. And then you guys can fight amongst yourselves on, who's got real rights, and they just walk away with billions. Conan did it right. He's doing stuff like he's got rights with HBO. He just did have that travel show, which, he's getting paid to do. He's got the distribution rights, like you said, going to Sirius for their own channel. Because I think he was with Earwolf for the start of that podcast.
Conan?
Yeah.
No, he was always by himself.
I thought Earwolf was pulling it out, like pushing it out.
Maybe it was. All right, maybe it was because Earwolf got bought by Sirius and absorbed into them, and Earwolf doesn't exist anymore. I think Earwolf and Stitcher all got absorbed by Sirius XM.
Okay.
And they're not doing well, by the way. So anyway, so the Kelsey brothers $100 million deal with Amazon. We go back to Alex Cooper here. So I'm trying to figure this out. $500 million plus, we'll say, deals in the last couple years, maybe 3 years. I'm trying to remember when Rogan's thing was. But that's unheard of. And this is starting a trend, it looks like, because $100 million seems to be the number, the trendy number now for corporations for buying these shows and licensing and doing whatever. So I'm thinking about it, and I was like, this reminded me of like the late 90s, early 2000s with the .com bubble. People were getting all this venture capital to go and start a .com and build things up, and like the concept's great, and then everything was overvalued, but then they'd spend all their money to build all these things, or they'd build it and then spent the rest of the money jet setting, yachts, premieres, all this kind of nonsense. And what happened, it all exploded or imploded, however you want to call it, and all the values dropped. The only two companies that out of that .com bubble that I remember that did well were eBay and Amazon.
Yeah.
Remember mp3.com was supposed to be the big thing because Napster was out there and LimeWire and Kazaa. Like, oh, if we just do mp3.com and make it the one-stop shop to get all your music and everything, we'll make $1 billion. And it didn't happen because, lo and behold, iTunes was born shortly after that. And we saw how that worked out for the music industry. So this whole thing now seems like they can't be making their money from this investment. Now, the ones I do know that probably are is because Rogan's deal was up and he just re-signed. Now, he didn't re-sign, I don't think, for another $100 million. I think it was a little bit less. But that's not a knock at Joe, and that's not saying he's underperforming. Their estimates were one thing, and the marketplace determined they were another. But he was still valuable enough. I think he went from $100 million to like $80 million. Significant amount of money, yes, but in the whole scheme of things, not really that much. But that's the only one we've seen so far. They renewed him, so obviously he was worth that investment because he was renewed, right? I guess you could even say Howard too. His first deal was $100 million a year for 5 years when he first went to satellite. It was less than I think the last I heard was $60 million for whatever his last deal was. But at the time, he was making his money for this company, and it seemed worth it. These other companies, I don't know how this is going to pan out. Because you've got streaming services that are bending over backwards and combining with other IPs that they don't own for bundle deals. Because they're all suffering. Movies are suffering. Everything's suffering as far as entertainment. You've never had a better time in your life for entertainment. You can find anything within a couple clicks. Books, music, TV, anything, video games. It's all there. And maybe too many choices have damaged the marketplace because there's nothing that's special anymore. There's no appointment listening, appointment viewing, appointment playing. I said this the other day and somebody was like, what's appointment playing? I'm like, video games. When you used to wait online, not me, but when people would wait online outside of a GameStop at midnight, Jordan.
Not you. I definitely did that. Halo 3, like people would have like competitions outside. The midnight releases meant midnight.
They did.
Like we would be around the wall, like around the block, lining up for the newest Call of Duty. Halo was the big ones. Like we did that all the time.
Yeah. So now that you don't have to do it at a certain time
Eric
or line up for
having
things,
sex with women, fucking asshole,
making money,
enjoying my.
You don't have to worry about all this stuff here. So now it's like. Nobody, we talked last week, late night that article about how late night's dying out,
Yeah.
and rightfully so. And from the words of Jimmy Kimmel, and he's not wrong. He said if ABC offers him a new deal, he'll sign it, because what else is he going to do? He's not going to fight it. There's no other late night stuff out there. And when he's done, he doesn't think they'll even replace him with another late night show. They'll just put something else on, because late night doesn't seem to be worth it for any of them anymore.
Because it comes back down to the appointment watching. Like, no one's appointment
Nobody
watching.
cares
They're
about
all
late night.
watching
Morning
on YouTube,
radio.
catching up on TikTok.
No one cares about morning radio anymore. And that was a big thing for the radio industry forever.
Yeah.
To
Morning
work your
radio
way
and
up
drive
to
time,
mornings was the big deal. Because Howard, you can listen on his replays or on demand, like an hour or two after his show's done. It's on demand. So you can just, it's like, I don't have to get up in the morning. I'll just listen to him in the midday or in the afternoon. Shows around the country, big shows, Elvis Duran, Woody, things like that. You should go listen to those guys, support those people. But a lot of people also listen to their shows on demand, where the music's cut out, the commercials are cut out, and they hear it all there. Doesn't mean they're not listening to these shows. Doesn't mean they're not fans of these things. They just don't need to get up and listen at that time, unfortunately. We go back to Alex here. I'm like, how is this going to break down? I don't understand it. She's very influential. She has a very big show and a very big audience, but is it going to make that kind of money? As I said that, the next day, an article broke down what the deal was, which is great because you don't usually get that kind of breakdown from it. So this is the breakdown of her $125 million deal with SiriusXM. The deal structure with SiriusXM incorporates performance-based metrics that Cooper must meet to realize the full potential of the $125 million valuation. So, unlike other deals, it's not like we're paying you $100 million for 3 years. There's stipulations and things that you have to meet, which is like radio.
Hit milestones.
Which is like radio. It's like, hey, you guys will give you a $3 million, $5 million contract per year to syndicate your show, but you also have to hit certain levels in certain markets, and then you get bonuses for, if your demographics go up, or if the overall goes up, or if the overall station goes up because your show's on that. There's all these different breakdowns where you make more money. Ad revenue, sales revenue, streaming revenue. Not just the ads that are on the radio in the car or on the radio. That you get different ads for the streaming stuff, which is important. So all these breakdowns now mean it's like you can potentially have this money. It's not a guarantee, but you got to do all of these other things. She will oversee the production and development of a full slate of programming for her Unwell network, which I guess is the name of her podcast network. This includes current and favorite shows featuring various influencers such as Alex Earl, Madeline Argy, Harry, I don't know any of these names, Harry Josie,
right,
and Owen Thiel. SiriusXM funds these projects, but as the network's leader, Cooper is responsible for managing budgets, including compensation for other hosts involved in the network. So the money goes to her, and she's now the boss. Like, she has to then pay everybody on her network. Sirius can put ads on all these things and distribute all these things, but they're not handling the operations. They're not handling the pay structure. It's like, we cut you a check. You're responsible for paying your own people. To meet her target, Cooper must maintain or increase listener numbers to meet specific download targets, a common practice in the industry known as download insurance. This ensures that the content remains engaging and reaches a broad audience. Additionally, she is expected to contribute to SiriusXM's broader programming beyond her podcast network, which probably means get out there and show up, that's local radio, but I was going to get out there and show up at the car dealership on Saturday morning because we're paying you a ton of money.
Yep.
This must mean that they can use her face for all kinds of advertising. If they have events, step and repeat events, red carpet stuff, concerts. I don't know if they're still doing the concert series at the Apollo anymore. That means she has to show up to all of those things if they want her there. So live events, special programming initiatives, and possibly roles in satellite radio offerings, as SiriusXM aims to bring a younger audience to its subscription-based product. I'm starting to think that they're probably, if this is the gamble they're doing, she might be the new face of Sirius.
Probably.
Like, Howard did what he did for that company, whether you agree with it or not. He was the face of that company for almost 2 decades now. Well, wait. 2 decades. Yeah. He was the face of that.
It goes a bit longer than
I just realized
it's
like no, wait, we went to satellite in 04. When did he go? He went 06. So he's all right, almost 2 decades for Howard.
It's just about,
But his audience is, dying off and not rejuvenating. Younger people don't care, and a lot of his audience left because they don't like a lot of the stuff that he does. He still has an audience, but it's not what it used to be. And the hype around him is definitely not what it used to be. So they might be looking at her as being the new face of the company, trying to bring in younger people. Because they have a big problem. We've talked about this a lot in the past. Like, if you're under 35, no one subscribes there. They have a dead end. Younger people are not accidentally finding satellite radio, or if they do in a car that has it on, they're not going to sign up for it. And why would they?
Well, and I think what it'll also do is it brings in a demographic that I think talk radio, and especially shows like Howard or anything like that, really don't skew toward, is that female audience. So they're going to bring in a lot of that female audience.
She's
that
got a
maybe
really
was
young
lacking.
audience too.
Yeah. So you've got stuff like that. I just learned, I didn't know what Wondery was for Amazon.
Right.
Apparently they also inked a deal back in July with Dax Shepard's Armchair Expert for like $80 million. So they signed him up for $80 million because I guess Smartless went away from.
Boring.
I thought so too. I tried watching some of the
We had him on O&A once or twice. He seemed like a nice enough guy. I'm a big fan of his wife's work. If you're not aware, Kristen Bell. I've tried. I know I have somebody in my family that loves Dak's podcast, and I went, really? Because I try to listen to it, and it's just, I don't even see. It's meant for like housewives, and I don't even know how they stand listening to this.
I feel like when he talks, it's like he's trying to work out some kind of therapy session. It's like Mark Maron.
And he doesn't know half the shit he's talking about either.
Right.
Like, it's one thing when we do a show and if something pops up live or right before we go on, it's like, oh, we don't have the information yet. We're looking for it while we're doing it.
Yeah.
He just goes, oh, yeah, I saw something the other day. Didn't write it down.
Research,
doesn't have the article. Doesn't have a clip. Doesn't have anything. It's just really lazy and boring. Anyway, Alex's show, I understand the popularity. I see the demographics. I get it. I don't like it in the sense of it's not for me. I'm not the audience for that thing. A lot of the speak, she's on that cusp of Gen Z millennial speak, and there is irritating to listen to and hypersexualized to the point where when you hear a woman's show where it's constant sex talk, it's a turn off from listening, not like being interested in those people, but it's just like I can't sit there and listen to this the whole time. And she's getting stuff out. She gets big celebrity. She's doing what she's supposed to do for the demo she's supposed to do it for, and that's what's important. I don't listen to it. It's not for me, but kudos to her for figuring this all out and landing this kind of deal that she can. So that's sort of the breakdown for her whole thing. This is, again, in the last 3 years, $100 million plus deal for a podcast. We are willing to sell this episode for $100 million. Now, if you want to talk about the show and our extensive catalog, we go back 10 years between two companies that we own the rights to. I'm willing to make a deal. But for this one episode is $100 million. So we're putting it out there so everybody knows.
Right.
If you have the money, let's talk.
If you're sitting on $100 million and you don't know what to do with it,
reach out to our Hollywood agent, Rob Stark.
Right. We'll get you his information.
And get the ball rolling. We can make the introduction. We are not involved in such legalities and formalities. You deal with him, and then we'll come to the table when we're ready to sign. But other than that, it's just insane that this is the new norm now. Radio
does seem like they
almost
hit
completely
like a number
dead,
that they're comfortable with.
And some of these podcasts are just getting $100 million deals. Now,
and think about like where she started, a couple years ago. She's now making double. Like they doubled what her last deal was. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, Jesus Christ.
She far blew away what she was making at Barstool Sports.
Oh, yeah.
But good. She figured out a way to do it. And the other one's wallowing in obscurity. Apparently, she still has a podcast. I know Carl from Who Are These Podcasts checks in on her once in a while. She speaks in vocal fry. You know what that is?
Yes.
I hate that when they talk like this.
Yeah. Hurts my throat.
Oh, yeah, it's so aggravating. But yeah, all right, that's it for $100 million. We are easily sold. We can do all of that stuff.